the world watches with bated breath as tensions escalate in the Middle East. The region, already a powder keg of political and military strife, now faces a new and alarming development. Yemen's Houthi leader, Abdul Malik al-Houthi, has issued a bold ultimatum to Israel. His words, broadcasted to millions, carry a weight that cannot be ignored. He demands an end to the blockade on Gaza. This blockade, which has been in place for years, has severely restricted the flow of goods and aid to the Palestinian territory. The deadline, a mere 4 days. The urgency in al-Houthi's voice underscores the gravity of the situation, the consequence of inaction, a resumption of Houthi attacks. These attacks, which have previously targeted Saudi Arabia and other regional adversaries, could now be directed at Israel. This ultimatum injects a volatile new element into an already precarious situation. The streets are filled with protesters and the military presence is palpable. Al-Houthi's message is clear: the world must act to alleviate the suffering in Gaza. The humanitarian crisis there is dire, with children and families bearing the brunt of the blockade. The blockade, he argues, is choking the life out of the Palestinian people. Essential supplies are not getting through, and the people are suffering immensely. Food, medicine, and essential supplies are dwindling. Clinics are overwhelmed, and markets are running out of basic necessities. The international community is now on notice. The clock is ticking. Diplomatic efforts are intensifying, but time is running out. The ultimatum has sent shockwaves through the region and beyond. News outlets around the world are covering the story, and people everywhere are anxiously following the developments. Israel, facing pressure from multiple fronts, must now contend with the possibility of renewed attacks from the Houthis. The Israeli military is on high alert, preparing for any eventuality. The international community is grappling with the implications of this ultimatum. Diplomatic channels are buzzing with activity as world leaders seek a resolution. It raises critical questions about the role of non-state actors in international conflicts and the responsibility to protect civilians caught in the crossfire. The humanitarian efforts continue, but they are not enough. The situation is a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of conflicts in the Middle East. What happens in one part of the region can have far-reaching consequences. What began as a conflict between Israel and Hamas now threatens to draw in regional actors like the Houthis. The alliances and enmities in the region are complex and ever-shifting. The stakes are incredibly high, refugee camps are swelling, and diplomatic efforts are reaching a fever pitch. The world waits anxiously to see how Israel will respond and what the consequences of this ultimatum will be. The next few days could shape the future of the region. Gaza, a densely populated strip of land on the Mediterranean coast, is facing a dire humanitarian crisis. Years of conflict, coupled with the ongoing blockade, have pushed the Palestinian enclave to the brink. The statistics paint a grim picture. Over 2 million people, the vast majority of Gaza's population, are experiencing acute food insecurity. Hospitals are struggling to function, their shelves bare of essential medicines and equipment. The blockade, enforced by Israel, has severely restricted the flow of goods and people in and out of Gaza. Basic necessities like food, fuel, and building materials are in critically short supply. The lack of access to clean water and sanitation has exacerbated the already dire health situation. Diseases, easily preventable with proper sanitation, are spreading rapidly. The impact on children is particularly devastating. Malnutrition rates are soaring, leaving children vulnerable to disease and stunting their development. The education system has been crippled, robbing an entire generation of their right to a proper education. The psychological toll of living under constant threat of violence and deprivation is immeasurable. The situation in Gaza is a humanitarian catastrophe unfolding in slow motion. The international community cannot stand idly by as millions suffer. Urgent action is needed to lift the blockade and provide life-saving assistance to the people of Gaza. Failure to act will have catastrophic consequences. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is inextricably linked to the complex political realities of the region. The densely populated area has long been a flashpoint of conflict, and the recent developments have only intensified the suffering of its residents. The recent halt in humanitarian aid, a move that has exacerbated the suffering in Gaza, is a case in point. Aid organizations have struggled to meet the basic needs of the population, with food, water, and medical supplies running dangerously low. Israel's decision to block aid was directly tied to the fragile ceasefire agreement with Hamas, the Palestinian militant group that controls Gaza. This blockade has not only heightened tensions, but also put immense pressure on the already strained resources within Gaza. The ceasefire, brokered by international mediators, was intended as a first step towards a more lasting peace. However, the complexities of the negotiations have made it difficult to maintain this fragile truce. A key sticking point in the negotiations has been the issue of captive exchanges. Families on both sides are desperate for the return of their loved ones, adding emotional weight to the already tense discussions. Hamas demands the release of Palestinian prisoners held by Israel, while Israel insists on the return of its citizens held by Hamas. This deadlock has made it difficult to move forward with other critical aspects of the ceasefire agreement. The recent breakdown in negotiations centers on the sequencing of these demands. Both sides are adamant about their positions, making compromise seem increasingly elusive. Hamas insists on adhering to all phases of the original agreement, which included a second phase focused on ending the war and beginning reconstruction. This phase is crucial for rebuilding the war-torn region and providing a semblance of normalcy for its residents. Israel, however, has sought to prioritize the release of its captives before addressing the broader issues of the conflict. This prioritization has led to further delays and frustrations on both sides. This impasse has had dire consequences for the people of Gaza. The ongoing blockade and lack of aid have left many without access to basic necessities, exacerbating the humanitarian crisis. The halt in aid has pushed the already fragile healthcare system to the brink of collapse. Hospitals are overwhelmed with patients, and the shortage of medical supplies has made it nearly impossible to provide adequate care. Hospitals are running out of essential supplies and patients are being turned away. The lack of medical care is particularly devastating for the most vulnerable, including children and the elderly. The situation is a stark reminder of how political maneuvering can have life-or-death consequences for civilians caught in the middle. The international community must act swiftly to address these urgent humanitarian needs and work towards a sustainable resolution to the conflict. Section 4. The Houthis champions of Gaza or agents of chaos. The Houthi ultimatum has thrust the Yemeni group into the center of the Gaza crisis, raising questions about their motivations and their role in the region. This move has not only drawn international attention but also sparked a debate about the true intentions behind their actions. Are they genuine champions of the Palestinian cause, or are they opportunistic actors seeking to exploit the situation for their own gain? This question is crucial in understanding the broader implications of their involvement. The answer, as is often the case in the Middle East, is complex and multifaceted. The region's intricate web of alliances and enmities makes it difficult to draw clear lines between friend and foe. The Houthis, a Shia Muslim group from northern Yemen, have been locked in a brutal civil war with the Yemeni government and its allies since 2014. This conflict has shaped their identity and their approach to regional politics. The conflict, often seen as a proxy war between regional rivals Saudi Arabia and Iran, has plunged Yemen into a humanitarian catastrophe. The devastation has been immense, with countless lives lost and millions displaced. The Houthis view themselves as defenders of the oppressed, fighting against what they perceive as corrupt regimes and foreign interference. This self-image is central to their narrative and their appeal to supporters. Their involvement in the Gaza crisis stems from their ideological opposition to Israel and their solidarity with the Palestinian people. This stance resonates with many in the Arab and Muslim world who share similar sentiments. The Houthis have repeatedly denounced Israel's policies towards the Palestinians and have provided symbolic support to Hamas. Their rhetoric is often charged with calls for resistance and liberation. Their recent ultimatum, however, marks a significant escalation of their involvement in the conflict. This bold move has raised the stakes and could have far-reaching consequences. Some analysts view the Houthi ultimatum as a calculated move to bolster their regional standing. By taking a strong stance on Gaza, they aim to position themselves as key players in the Middle Eastern political landscape. By positioning themselves as defenders of Gaza, they aim to garner support from the Arab and Muslim world. This strategy could help them gain new allies and strengthen their position both domestically and internationally. Others see it as a desperate attempt to break out of their diplomatic isolation. The Houthis have been largely isolated on the international stage, and this move could be an attempt to change that. The Houthis are facing mounting international pressure over their attacks on civilian targets in Yemen and Saudi Arabia. This pressure has forced them to seek new ways to assert their relevance and legitimacy. As the humanitarian crisis in Yemen continues to worsen, the Houthis' actions in Gaza could also be seen as a way to divert attention from their own domestic challenges. The international community remains deeply concerned about the situation in Yemen, and the Houthis' involvement in Gaza adds another layer of complexity to an already dire situation. Section 5. Houthi aggression, a timeline of recent events. The Houthi ultimatum did not emerge in a vacuum. It is the latest development in a series of events that have heightened tensions in the region. To understand the current situation, it is crucial to examine the Houthis' recent actions and the international response they have elicited. In October 2023, the Houthis significantly escalated their attacks, targeting Israeli cities with drone and missile strikes. These attacks, while largely unsuccessful in inflicting significant damage, demonstrated the Houthis' willingness to directly engage Israel. They also targeted commercial ships in the Red Sea, disrupting vital shipping lanes and raising concerns about the safety of maritime navigation. These actions drew swift condemnation from the international community. The United States, along with over 20 other countries, formed a coalition to protect commercial traffic in the Red Sea. This coalition has carried out targeted strikes against Houthi facilities and weapons systems in Yemen, seeking to degrade their military capabilities and deter further attacks. Despite these efforts, the Houthis have remained defiant. They have vowed to continue their attacks, framing them as legitimate acts of resistance against what they perceive as Israeli aggression and Western imperialism. The Houthi ultimatum is a continuation of this strategy, seeking to leverage the humanitarian crisis in Gaza to advance their own agenda.